Welcome back to Apex Sci-Fi. In most science fiction, space travel is elegant. Ships land softly on landing pads, ramps lower gracefully, and diplomats walk out to shake hands. But in a real interplanetary war, you don't have time for elegance. You don't have time to dock. You have to put boots on the ground and you have to do it fast. Today's story is about the orbital drop. The most violent, terrifying, and effective method of deployment ever invented. It involves strapping a human being into a metal coffin, firing them out of a cannon, and letting gravity do the rest. They call it the Iron Rain. And for the soldiers inside those pods, it is the longest 5 minutes of their lives. If you have the guts to jump feet first into hell, smash that like button. If you think you'd rather stay on the ship, subscribe and ring the bell to watch from orbit. Check your seals. Charge your weapons. We are dropping in 3, 2, 1. The smell inside a drop pod is unique. It's a mix of ozone, hydraulic fluid, recycled oxygen, and the cold, metallic sweat of fear. Corporal Jackson sat in pod Alpha 9, staring at the red emergency light pulsating above his head. The space was cramped, barely enough room to move his arms. His heavy Mk4 power armor was locked into the magnetic harness, holding him rigid against the crash seat. Sound off, Sergeant Miller's voice crackled in his helmet earpiece. The signal was crisp, transmitted directly from the squad leader's pod 3 slots down in the launch bay of the UNS Retribution. Jackson Green, he replied. Veras Green. Kowalski Green. I think I'm gonna puke, Sarge. Save it for the bugs, Kowalski, Miller barked. Don't gum up your visor before we even hit the dirt. The ship's PA system chimed. It wasn't a human voice. It was the synthetic, calm voice of the ship's AI, Mother. All units. We have entered the orbit of Cal 4. Atmospheric entry vectors calculated. Flak suppression is partial. Expect resistance. Partial. That was a polite way of saying the enemy was shooting back. The launch bay was a cathedral of steel. Hundreds of pods lined the walls like bullets in a magazine. Outside the hull, Jackson knew the fleet was positioning itself. The planet below was a nightmare world of swamps, acid rain, and the xenomites, an insectoid species that didn't use technology but biology. They bred plasma-spitting beetles the size of tanks. They had anti-air spores that could melt hull plating. And Jackson was about to be fired right into the middle of them. Clang. The sound of the magnetic clamps releasing echoed through the hull. For a split second, the pod floated free in the tube. Zero gravity. Jackson's stomach drifted into his chest. Then the magnetic railguns fired. Boom. 4 Gs of acceleration slammed Jackson into his seat. His vision blurred at the edges. The pod screamed as it was ejected from the belly of the carrier ship. He was no longer a soldier. He was a projectile. Through the small, reinforced glass viewport between his feet, Jackson saw the fleet. It was a terrifyingly beautiful sight. Thousands of silver streaks were pouring from the ships above, raining down towards the dark, swirling clouds of the planet. The Iron Rain. Formation looks tight, Veras said over the comms. Let's hope the landing zone is clear. Cut the chatter, Sarge ordered. We are hitting the upper atmosphere in 5 seconds. Brace for the burn. The silence of space ended. A low roar began to build. It sounded like a freight train rushing towards him. The pod began to shake. Not a gentle vibration but a violent, teeth-rattling shudder. The viewport glowed red. Then orange. Then a blinding, angry white. Friction. They were hitting the air wall at Mach 25. The ceramic heat shield on the bottom of the pod was ablating, burning away to protect the soft meat inside. The temperature outside was 3,000 degrees Celsius. Inside, the cooling fans screamed, fighting to keep Jackson from cooking alive. Then came the flak. Black puffs of smoke appeared in the clouds below. Thump, thump. Shockwaves hit the pod, knocking it off axis. The navigational thrusters fired frantically, spitting compressed gas to keep the pod upright. They're targeting the cluster. Kowalski yelled. I see tracers. Jackson looked out the side window. He saw pod Beta 6, occupied by a kid named Jenkins from the 4th platoon. A stream of green plasma rose from the clouds. It struck Jenkins' pod. There was no explosion. The pod just disintegrated. 1 second it was there, the next it was a cloud of molten slag and vapor. Man down. Veras screamed. They got Jenkins. Eyes on your own pod. Sarge roared. You can't help him. Stay on target. Jackson gripped the control sticks. He couldn't steer, not really. He could only make micro-adjustments to keep from tumbling. He was falling in a burning stone, waiting for the ground to catch him. Altitude 50,000 feet, Mother's voice announced in his ear. Deploying drag chutes. Wow. The chutes deployed. The deceleration was brutal. Jackson groaned as the harness dug into his shoulders. The roar of the wind dropped an octave, but the shaking got worse. They punched through the cloud layer. The viewport cleared. Below them was the swamp. Dark water, twisted gray trees and fog. And movement. Thousands of moving shapes. LZ is hot. Jackson yelled. Repeat, LZ is hot. We are dropping right on top of them. Prepare for impact. The ground rushed up to meet them. 100 feet. Retro rockets fired. Whoosh. Zero velocity. Crunch. The pod slammed into the mud. The impact gel in the suit hardened, absorbing the lethal force, but Jackson's head still snapped forward. Silence. For 1 second there was absolute silence. Then the red combat light turned green. Deployment complete. Door release armed. Jackson punched the big red button on the console. Bang. The explosive bolts on the door detonated. The heavy metal hatch blasted outward, crushing a xenomite that had been waiting outside. Jackson didn't wait. He didn't think. Training took over. He unclipped the harness, grabbed his heavy pulse rifle and rolled out of the pod into the mud. Rain. Heavy, oily rain. It coated his visor instantly. Sound off. Sarge's voice cut through the storm. Jackson up. Vera's up. Kalski. I'm up. My leg hurts, but I'm up. Form a perimeter. Sarge ordered. They're coming. Jackson scanned the darkness. His thermal vision turned the world into shades of blue and gray. Then the forest lit up. Heat signatures. Hundreds of them. Glowing red and orange against the cold mud. Contact front. Jackson screamed. North. 50 meters. The xenomites emerged from the fog. They were nightmares of chitin and muscle. 4 legs, scythe-like arms, and mandibles that dripped acidic saliva. They didn't use guns. They didn't need them. They were a swarm. Open fire. The squad unleashed hell. The heavy pulse rifles roared, sending 10mm explosive-tipped rounds tearing through the alien ranks. Green blood sprayed into the air. Chitin shattered. Bodies piled up. But for every bug they killed, 2 more crawled over the corpse. They're flanking us. Veras yelled. Left side. They're in the trees. A xenomite leaped from a branch, landing on top of Vera's pod. It shrieked, raising its size. Jackson spun and fired a burst. The alien's head exploded. Its body slumped off the pod. Thanks, brother. Veras panted. Don't thank me, reload. We can't hold this low ground. Sarge realized. The pods are sitting ducks. Fall back to the ridge. Point 4 Alpha. Move, move, move. The squad began a fighting retreat. Running in power armor through a swamp is like running in deep water. The servos whined, fighting the suction of the mud. Bolts of green plasma fizzed past Jackson's head. One struck his shoulder plate, burning through the ceramic. His HUD flashed a warning, armor integrity, 85%. He ignored it. He kept firing. They reached the ridge, a rocky outcropping that offered a firing line. Other squads were already there. Survivors from other pods. A patchwork army of gray armor, holding the line against the green tide. Jackson. Get the saw up. Sarge pointed to a gap in the rocks. Jackson deployed the squad automatic weapon. He slammed the bipod down. Come and get some, he roared. The next 20 minutes were a blur of noise and violence. The barrel of his gun glowed red hot. He changed barrels. He changed ammo belts. The pile of dead aliens at the bottom of the hill grew so high it created a ramp for the living ones to climb. I'm out of ammo. Kalski screamed, pulling his combat knife. Use the pistol. Use rocks. Just hold the line. Suddenly the ground shook. A massive shape emerged from the fog. A xenomite titan. It was the size of a building covered in thick armored plates. It crushed the trees as it walked. It opened its mouth, charging a massive plasma blast. Take cover. Sarge yelled. The blast hit the ridge. Rocks shattered. Men screamed. Jackson looked up, shaking the dust from his visor. We can't kill that thing. Veras yelled. We need air support. Comms are jammed. Sarge shouted back. The spores are blocking the signal. Jackson looked at his wrist computer. He had a beacon. A hardline orbital distinct beacon. I'm going to tag it. Jackson said. You have to get close. Sarge grabbed his arm. That's suicide. It's going to kill us all anyway. Jackson broke free. He vaulted over the rocks. He slid down the hill of alien corpses. The Titan saw him. It turned its massive head. Jackson sprinted. The mud splashed. The smaller bugs swiped at him. He kicked them away with his armored boots. He reached the base of the Titan's leg. He pulled the beacon flare, ignited it, and jammed it into a crack in the Titan's armor. "Eagle 1, this is Jackson," he screamed into the open channel, hoping the flare would punch through the jamming. "Danger close. Fire on my smoke." He turned and ran. He didn't look back. He heard the sound before he saw it. The screech of atmospheric engines. A Valkyrie gunship dropped out of the clouds like an angry god. BRRRT. The 30mm Avenger cannon tore the air apart. The rounds impacted the Titan. The armor shattered. The creature roared in agony as it was turned into Swiss cheese. Then the Valkyrie dropped a bunker buster bomb. Boom. The shockwave threw Jackson face first into the mud. He lay there for a moment. Ringing ears. Taste of blood. He rolled over. The Titan was gone. Just a burning crater. The swarm was retreating, screeching in fear of the air support. The dropship hovered, lowering its ramp. "Get in. Go, go, go." Jackson limped up the ramp. Varys dragged Kowalski. Sarge covered the rear. As the dropship lifted off, Jackson looked out the back. The swamp was on fire. The pods were smoking ruins. The bodies of friends and enemies littered the mud. He took off his helmet. The air inside the ship was cold. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Sarge walked over. He looked at Jackson. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Good run, Corporal," Sarge said. "Get some sleep. We drop again in 6 hours." Jackson leaned his head back against the bulkhead. He closed his eyes, but he could still hear the rain. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. We call them Space Marines in movies. We call them heroes. But the reality of dropping from orbit is a trauma that never ends. If you felt the impact of this story, hit that like button to salute the Helljumpers. Comment below, would you trust the pod or would you trust your own feet? Subscribe for more war stories from the stars. Feet first into hell. Transmission ended.